Weeping alien dragon. Mother brings her ailing hatchling to a human handyman for help. The morning started like any other for Marcus Chen. His small repair shop sat at the edge of New Terra Colony, where broken machinery came to find new life under his skilled hands. Coffee steamed from a chipped mug as he sorted through the day's work orders. Atmospheric processors, water recyclers, and the usual collection of domestic appliances that kept the frontier settlement running. Then the ground shook. Marcus looked up from his workbench, tools rattling against metal. Through the grimy window, he saw something that made him question his morning caffeine intake. A massive shadow fell across the courtyard as something enormous descended from the amber sky. The creature that landed was unlike anything in the colony's xenobiology databases. She stood nearly 4 meters tall, her scales shimmering between deep purple and midnight blue. 6 powerful legs supported her serpentine body, while gossamer wings folded against her sides like torn silk. Most striking were her eyes, large, multifaceted orbs that reflected pain and desperate hope in equal measure. In her front claws, she cradled something small and still. Marcus had seen enough injured animals in his youth on Earth to recognize suffering. The tiny being in her grasp was barely the size of a house cat, its scales dull and lifeless where they should have sparkled like its mother's. Shallow breathing made its small chest rise and fall in irregular patterns. The mother dragon made a sound, a low, melodic keen that spoke of anguish across any language barrier. When she saw Marcus emerge from his shop, she didn't retreat. Instead, she approached slowly, each step deliberate and careful. "Easy there, big girl," Marcus said softly, raising his hands palm up. He'd learned that tone mattered more than words when dealing with frightened creatures. "What's wrong with the little one?" She tilted her massive head, studying him with those impossible eyes. Then she did something that nearly stopped Marcus's heart. She carefully placed her hatchling on his workbench and stepped back, a gesture so human-like in its trust that it took his breath away. The baby dragon was worse off than Marcus had initially thought. Its scales were turning gray at the edges, and a strange metallic odor hung around its small form. But what caught his attention wasn't the obvious signs of illness. It was the small device attached to the creature's neck, blinking with an angry red light. Marcus had seen similar devices before, neural implants used for tracking and control. This one looked crude, almost primitive, but it was clearly causing problems. The skin around it was inflamed, and thin wisps of smoke occasionally escaped from the connection points. "Someone put a collar on your baby," Marcus murmured, more to himself than the watching mother. "And it's killing them slowly." The mother dragon's keen grew higher, more urgent. She pointed one claw at the device, then at Marcus, then back to her child. The message was clear even without shared language. Marcus examined the implant more closely. It wasn't just a tracking device. It was some kind of neural inhibitor designed to suppress the natural development of whatever made these creatures special. The technology was foreign, but the principle was familiar. He'd seen similar setups used to control livestock, preventing them from developing natural defense mechanisms. "This is going to hurt," Marcus warned, looking up at the mother. She seemed to understand, pressing her great head against his shoulder in what could only be described as a nod of consent. Working with makeshift tools, Marcus began the delicate process of removing the device. The implant had grown into the hatchling's nervous system, requiring careful separation of organic and artificial components. The mother watched every movement, occasionally offering soft chirps that seemed to calm her child. Hours passed. The baby dragon remained unconscious throughout the procedure, its breathing growing shallower as Marcus worked. More than once. He thought he might be too late. But something drove him forward, perhaps the desperate hope in the mother's eyes, or the simple wrongness of what had been done to an innocent creature. Finally, with a soft click, the device came free. The hatchling's breathing immediately deepened, and color began returning to its scales. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was noticeable. Where dull gray had spread, vibrant blue-green now emerged like dawn breaking through clouds. The mother dragon's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She nuzzled her child gently, then turned to Marcus with what could only be described as gratitude. She touched her forehead to his, a gesture so gentle despite her massive size that it brought tears to his eyes. As if on cue, the hatchling stirred. Its eyes opened, brilliant golden orbs that sparkled with intelligence and curiosity. It looked around confused for a moment, then focused on Marcus. To his amazement, it made a small chirping sound that almost sounded like "thank you" in standard colonial. But their moment of relief was short-lived. The sound of approaching vehicles filled the air, heavy transports moving fast. Marcus recognized the engine signatures. Corporate security forces, and they were heading straight for his shop. The mother dragon heard them too. Her head snapped up, and for the first time since arriving, she showed signs of real fear. She gathered her hatchling protectively, but there was nowhere to run. The approaching vehicles had already surrounded the area. "They're coming for you," Marcus realized aloud. That device, it wasn't just controlling your baby, it was tracking them. The dragon mother looked at him with those expressive eyes, and Marcus saw something that made his decision for him. She wasn't asking him to fight. She was asking him to choose a side. The vehicles were getting closer, their engines growing louder. In minutes, they would arrive. Whatever corporate interest had put that device on an innocent creature would not be pleased to find their property liberated. And they would certainly not be happy with the human who had interfered with their plans. Marcus looked at his small shop, filled with the honest work of fixing broken things. Then he looked at the dragon mother and her now alert hatchling. Some things, he realized, were more important than staying out of trouble. "Come on," he said, grabbing his emergency repair kit and what supplies he could carry. "I know a place where they won't find us." As the first security transport crested the hill, Marcus led the dragon family out the back of his shop, into the maze of service tunnels that honeycombed the colony's foundation. Behind them, his peaceful morning was about to become a very complicated day. But seeing the spark of life return to the hatchling's eyes, Marcus found he didn't regret his choice. Some repairs, he thought, as they disappeared into the tunnels, were worth more than just fixing machines. The hunt was about to begin, and Marcus Chen, simple handyman, was about to discover that sometimes the most important job isn't fixing what's broken. It's protecting what's been healed. Weeping alien dragon mother brings her ailing hatchling to a human handyman for help. The maintenance tunnels beneath New Terra Colony had never been designed for creatures the size of dragon mothers. The mother had to fold her wings tight and lower her head to navigate the narrow passages, but she followed Marcus without complaint. Her hatchling rode on her back now, clinging with tiny claws and making soft, trilling sounds that seemed to express wonder at their underground journey. Marcus led them deeper into the colony's infrastructure, past humming power conduits and gurgling water mains. His destination was a forgotten storage facility from the early days of settlement, when the colony planners had been more optimistic about expansion than reality warranted. "In here," Marcus whispered, sliding aside a maintenance panel that opened into a much larger chamber. Emergency lighting cast everything in a soft blue glow, revealing stacks of sealed containers and abandoned construction equipment. The dragon mother squeezed through the opening and immediately began examining their new hiding place. She moved with the practiced caution of someone who had been hunted before, checking corners and testing the air with her sensitive nostrils. "They can't track us here," Marcus explained, sealing the panel behind them. "These old sections are shielded from most scanning equipment. We should be safe while we figure out our next move." The hatchling had perked up considerably since the removal of the neural implant. It scrambled down from its mother's back and began exploring the chamber with obvious curiosity. When it discovered its own reflection in a polished metal surface, it chirped with delight and tried to touch noses with its mirror image. Watching the little one play, Marcus felt a surge of anger at whoever had put that device on such an innocent creature. But he pushed the emotion aside. Right now, they needed practical solutions, not righteous fury. "I don't suppose you can tell me who did this to you," Marcus said to the mother dragon. She tilted her head, considering, then did something unexpected. She extended one claw and began drawing shapes in the dust on the floor. The symbols were unlike anything in colonial standard, but their meaning became clear as she added details. A ship with angular lines, figures in protective suits, and unmistakably, the logo of Hegemony Biotech, one of the largest xenobiology corporations operating in this sector. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Hegemony Biotech had a reputation for pushing ethical boundaries in their research. If they were involved, this situation was far more dangerous than he'd initially thought. "They captured you," Marcus said, understanding. "Both of you. The implant was part of some kind of experiment." The dragon mother's expression confirmed his fears. She drew more symbols. Cages, other creatures, procedures that made Marcus's stomach turn. She and her child had escaped from something much worse than simple imprisonment. A new sound reached them through the tunnels, the whine of scanning equipment being deployed. The security forces were conducting a systematic search, using technology that would eventually penetrate even these shielded sections. The hatchling sensed the tension and moved closer to its mother, who gathered it protectively in her arms. For the first time since removing the implant, Marcus wondered if he'd made things worse by interfering. Without the tracking device, Hegemony Biotech would have to search the hard way, but they clearly weren't giving up. "We need help," Marcus admitted. "I'm just one person with a repair shop. This is way beyond what I can handle alone." The dragon mother studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised him. She approached one of the sealed containers and touched it with her claw. The container's lock mechanism responded to her touch, clicking open to reveal sophisticated communication equipment. "You knew this was here," Marcus realized. "You've been to this colony before." She nodded, then began working with the equipment with obvious familiarity. Her claws moved over the controls with surprising delicacy, inputting commands that brought the system to life. Soon, a holographic display filled the air above them. What Marcus saw made him step back in shock. The display showed a star map with dozens of marked systems, each connected by glowing lines that indicated some kind of network. At the center of it all was Earth, but not the Earth he knew from colonial records. This showed Earth surrounded by hundreds of ships, all bearing the same distinctive hull configuration as the dragon mother's species. "There are more of you," Marcus breathed. "A lot more." The dragon mother confirmed this with a series of gestures, then pointed to a section of the map that included their current system. Several ships were marked as being nearby, but they were maintaining distance for some reason. The hatchling had been watching the display with obvious fascination, but now it did something that made both adults freeze. It chirped once, clearly, and the display responded by zooming in on their exact location. Somehow, the little one had interfaced with the equipment directly, without touching any controls. The implant wasn't just controlling your child, Marcus realized with growing amazement. It was suppressing their natural abilities. They can interface with technology directly, can't they? The mother dragon's expression was a mix of pride and fear. She gestured at the display, then at her child, trying to explain something crucial. Marcus watched as she drew more symbols in the dust, symbols that looked like mathematical equations and star charts. Slowly, the picture became clear. The dragon species, whatever they called themselves, were natural navigators, able to interface with technology in ways that made them incredibly valuable for space travel. That's why Hegemony Biotech had captured them, not just for study, but for exploitation. "They want to use your people as living computers," Marcus said, horrified. "Turn you into slaves for their ships." The confirmation came not from the mother dragon, but from her hatchling. The little one had been listening to their conversation, and now it spoke for the first time in clear colonial standard. "Not just ships," the hatchling said in a voice like crystal chimes. "Everything. They want to make us into tools for all their machines, but we are not tools. We are free." Hearing the child speak hit Marcus harder than anything else that had happened. This wasn't just about helping an injured animal. This was about protecting the freedom and dignity of an entire sapient species. The scanning sounds were getting closer now, and Marcus knew they couldn't stay hidden much longer. But looking at the star map, he had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Can you contact your people?" he asked the hatchling. "Tell them what's happening here?" The little dragon nodded eagerly, then touched the communication panel with one tiny claw. Immediately, the equipment came alive with activity. Signals pulsed outward into space, carrying messages in frequencies that human equipment couldn't normally access. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, responses began coming back. The star map updated to show ship movements, vessels changing course and heading toward their system. The cavalry was coming, but Marcus wondered if it would arrive in time. That's when the maintenance panel exploded inward, and armed figures in Hegemony Biotech uniforms poured into the chamber. Their leader, a cold-eyed woman with corporate insignia, surveyed the scene with obvious satisfaction. "Dr. Chen," she said, consulting a datapad. "Simple handyman according to your colony records. Though your recent activities suggest you're anything but simple." Marcus stepped protectively in front of the dragon family, though he knew it was a futile gesture. "They're living beings, not property you can just experiment on." The woman laughed coldly. "The navigators are an extremely valuable resource, Dr. Chen. Their abilities could revolutionize space travel and computation. We can't allow sentiment to interfere with such important research." "Navigators," the hatchling said clearly, surprising the corporate soldiers. "That's what you call us. But our name for ourselves means those who touch the stars. And we choose our own paths." The hegemony leader's eyes gleamed with avarice. "Remarkable. The neural development has accelerated beyond our projections. This specimen will be especially valuable for our breeding program." That's when Marcus realized the full scope of their plan. They weren't just capturing individual navigators. They were planning to breed them in captivity, creating generation after generation of enslaved beings for corporate use. The Dragon Mother had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now she raised her head and made a sound Marcus had never heard before. It started as a low hum, then rose in pitch and volume until it seemed to resonate through the very structure of the colony. It was a call for help, and it was being answered. The star map showed ships accelerating toward their position, and Marcus realized that the situation was about to become much more complicated for Hegemony Biotech. The real question was whether they would survive long enough for rescue to arrive. The corporate soldiers were raising their weapons, and Marcus found himself standing between them and a family he'd sworn to protect. He wasn't a soldier or a hero, just a handyman who'd tried to help. But sometimes that was enough. Weeping alien dragon mother brings her ailing hatchling to a human handyman for help. The hegemony soldiers raised their weapons, but before anyone could fire, the chamber filled with a sound like singing crystal. The hatchling had placed both claws on the communication panel, and every piece of electronic equipment in the room began to respond to its touch. Emergency lights strobed in complex patterns. The holographic display expanded to fill the entire chamber, and most importantly, every weapon the soldiers carried suddenly went dead. Their power cells drained in an instant. "Impossible!" The corporate leader breathed, staring at her useless sidearm. The neural suppressor should have prevented any manifestation of navigator abilities. You removed it, the hatchling said matter-of-factly, as if this should have been obvious. Marcus fixed me. Now I can touch the star paths again. The dragon mother moved to stand beside her child, one protective claw resting gently on the little one's back. For the first time since the soldiers had burst in, she spoke. Her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, speaking colonial standard with careful precision. "My child speaks truth," she said. "We are free now, and freedom calls to freedom across all the dark between stars." As if summoned by her words, a new tremor ran through the colony's structure. But this wasn't the vibration of landing ships. This was something much larger. Through the chamber's ceiling, they could all hear the unmistakable sound of atmospheric entry, growing louder by the moment. Marcus had worked on enough spacecraft to recognize the acoustic signature. Multiple ships, all large, all coming in fast. The cavalry had arrived, and they were not subtle about their approach. The hegemony leader was frantically trying to restore power to her equipment, but nothing responded. Around her, soldiers who had counted on technological superiority found themselves reduced to crude hand weapons against creatures they didn't understand. "You don't know what you've done," the woman snarled at Marcus. "The navigators are a strategic resource. This interference constitutes an act of war against corporate interests." "No," said a new voice from the entrance to the chamber. "This interference constitutes an act of justice against corporate crimes." Marcus turned to see Colonial Administrator Sarah Webb entering the chamber, followed by a squad of Colonial security officers. But what surprised him more was who accompanied them. 3 more navigators, each one larger and more impressive than even the mother dragon. "Dr. Chen," Administrator Webb continued, "we've been monitoring Hegemony Biotech's illegal activities for months. Your intervention provided the evidence we needed to act officially." The corporate leader's face went pale. "Administrator Webb, you don't have jurisdiction over corporate research operations. Our permits are all in order." "Your permits," Webb replied coldly, "do not extend to the abduction and torture of sapient beings. The navigators filed formal diplomatic contact 3 days ago. As of this morning, they are recognized as a sovereign species under colonial treaty provisions." One of the newly arrived navigators stepped forward. This one was ancient by any measure, scales worn smooth by time and space travel, eyes holding the depth of someone who had seen the birth and death of stars. "I am Elder Star Whisper," the ancient navigator said, "speaker for those who touch the star paths. We come to reclaim our stolen children, and to thank the human who showed them kindness." The elder approached Marcus directly, ignoring the now powerless soldiers. "Simple Handyman," Star Whisper said, with what might have been amusement. "You have done a thing that will echo across generations. You saw suffering and acted to heal it, without thought of consequence or reward. This is the way of true wisdom." Marcus felt embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't let that thing keep hurting the little one." "Anyone would not," the elder corrected gently. "Many would fear. Many would calculate cost and benefit. You simply acted with compassion. This is why humans continue to surprise us, despite your youth as a species." The hatchling had been watching this exchange with obvious excitement. Now it scampered over to Marcus and climbed up his arm to perch on his shoulder, chattering in its own language while occasionally switching to colonial standard. "Star Father Marcus," it said clearly, making Marcus's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "The little one has chosen to honor you with a name gift. In our culture, this creates bonds that transcend species." The dragon mother approached next, touching her forehead gently to Marcus's free hand. "My child lives because of your courage," she said softly. "How do we repay such a debt?" You don't, Marcus said firmly. There's no debt between friends. Elder Star Whisper made a sound that could only be described as laughter. Friends? Yes. This word has power. Humans understand friendship in ways that surprise us. You make alliances not from calculation, but from affection. The hegemony leader had been growing increasingly desperate during this exchange. Now she stepped forward, trying to reassert control of the situation. This is all very touching, she said acidly, but these specimens represent millions of credits in research investment. Hegemony Biotech will not simply write off such valuable assets. Specimens? The Dragon Mother repeated, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. Assets? The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The other navigators moved to flank the corporate soldiers. And Marcus suddenly understood why Hegemony had needed neural suppressors to control their captives. Free navigators were clearly not helpless victims. I think, Administrator Webb said diplomatically, that it would be wise for all Hegemony personnel to withdraw from this system immediately. Your research permits have been revoked and criminal charges are being prepared. You can't do this, the corporate leader protested. We have contracts, legal protections, corporate sovereignty agreements. You had those things, Webb corrected, right up until you decided to torture children. Even corporate sovereignty has limits. Elder Star Whisper stepped forward, and when the ancient navigator spoke, the air itself seemed to resonate with authority. Hegemony Biotech will leave now, Star Whisper commanded. You will release all navigator captives. You will destroy all research data derived from our people, and you will never again attempt to enslave those who touch the star paths. And if we refuse? The corporate leader asked defiantly. In response, the hatchling on Marcus's shoulder chirped once. Immediately, every piece of hegemony equipment in the chamber, including their transportation beacons, sparked and died. Similar power failures were clearly happening throughout the colony, based on the cursing coming from the soldiers' communication devices. That was just one child, barely out of the egg, Elder Star Whisper noted conversationally. We have thousands of adults in our fleet above. How long do you think your ships would remain functional if we chose to disable them? The corporate leader looked around the chamber, clearly calculating odds she didn't like. Finally, she signaled her troops to stand down. This isn't over, she said to Marcus specifically. Hegemony Biotech doesn't forget interference with its operations. Neither do navigators forget debts of honor, the Dragon Mother replied calmly. Marcus Chen is under our protection now. Threaten him, and you threaten us all. As the defeated soldiers filed out of the chamber, Administrator Webb approached Marcus with a document pad. Dr. Chen, I have an offer for you. The colonial government is establishing a new position, Xenological Liaison Officer. The job involves helping other species integrate with human settlements. Interested? Marcus looked at the hatchling, still perched on his shoulder, then at the Dragon Mother who had trusted him with her child's life. Will it involve a lot of repair work? Different kind of repairs, Webb admitted. But yes, fixing things that are broken between species rather than just machines. Sounds like my kind of work, Marcus said, accepting the pad. Elder Star Whisper approached as the humans concluded their business. Marcus Chen, Starfather, there is something else. The navigators wish to share a gift with your people. Knowledge of the deep star paths, routes through space that your ships cannot yet find. This is our thanks for your kindness to our children. That's not necessary, Marcus protested. I didn't help them for any reward. Which is precisely why you deserve it, the elder replied, and why humans, despite your youth, may prove to be the finest friends the navigators have found in all our wanderings. As the chamber emptied and everyone prepared to return to the surface, the hatchling nuzzled against Marcus's cheek and whispered something in its native language. What did the little one say? Marcus asked the mother dragon. She translated with obvious warmth. They said, Star Father Marcus makes broken things whole. Now the star paths will never be lonely again." Marcus looked around the chamber that had been their refuge, thinking about the chain of events that had brought them all together. A simple repair job had become something much larger. First contact, interspecies friendship, and the beginning of something new between humans and navigators. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important repairs weren't the ones you planned. Sometimes you just had to recognize what was broken and be willing to fix it, regardless of the consequences. And sometimes in doing so, you discovered that what you thought was just a job was actually a calling. The dragon family was safe, the navigators were free, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, new pathways were opening for both their species to explore together. For a simple handyman, Marcus thought with satisfaction, it had been a pretty good day's work.